Welcome to the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, wife, mother of two and devoted homemaker. Join me on this journey as we explore the beauty of slow and simple living, where life unfolds at its own unhurried pace. I'll take you through my experiences of slowing down, tending to our allotment plot, finding joy in the little things and making the most of our small home. Together we'll learn to live in harmony with the ever-changing seasons, discovering the magic that lies in embracing the present moment. So let's embark on this enriching adventure towards a more intentional and fulfilling life. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Slow Living Collective podcast. I'm Amy, and today I have a fantastic guest for you. Today I am speaking with Cath. She is a medical herbalist, and you can find her on Instagram and online at Woodside Apothecary. Cath and I are going to be talking about all things herbalism and just living an alternative and holistic lifestyle. So be sure to listen in. But before we continue, Cath has an exclusive offer just for listeners of this podcast. If you are looking to take control of your health and well-being, then you can grab £15 off a consultation with Cath. All you need to do is either head over to @Woodside Apothecary on Instagram or go to woodsideapothecary.com and you can contact Cath directly through there. Just say that you heard her on the Slow Living Collective podcast and she will do the rest. Okay, without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hi, Cath. Thank you so much for joining me today on the podcast. Before we jump into today's episode, do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about who you are?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's really lovely to be here. So my name is Cath Cousins. I am a medical herbalist. I am based in Cheshire, not far from Manchester, but I look after patients all over the UK. I offer Zoom appointments as well as in-person consultations. But I haven't always been a herbalist. I've only been a herbalist for about 2 years. I have a kind of interesting career story in that I used to work in luxury hotels and restaurants, and I set up my own marketing and sales and PR agency way back in 2004. Worked with some amazing brands. The agency at its largest was about 8 people strong.
Oh.
And then in 2017, I started to get really quite stressed. I was doing a lot of international travel. It was becoming quite a stressful environment. Clients were becoming quite demanding, although I loved all of the work. And it got to the stage where I was driving to work and sitting in the car crying in the morning, which is not a good place to be when you're going into your own company. And I actually ended up in really terrible pain and admitting myself into A&E, walking into A&E with really bad pain in my stomach, and was taken up to a ward, and they thought I had gallbladder problems. So I had an MRI, CT scan, ultrasound. I was on the maximum dose of medicine that I could have, which was morphine and tramadol, and peppermint oil, which is kind of a funny one now. Um, and they couldn't really find out what was wrong with me. And I was kept in for almost a week. And then I was discharged back to my GP, still in real pain, terrible pain. And my GP put me on some medication and then was sent for further investigations, cameras, and they still couldn't really find anything wrong with me. One of the consultants said that he suspected I had passed a gallstone.
Okay.
But it was incredible pain. And I was falling apart. I was in terrible pain. I couldn't really concentrate at work. I couldn't focus. I was really tired. I lost a lot of weight very quickly, which wasn't really healthy. I looked really grey. And I was desperate. And a friend said to me, "Have you ever thought about seeing a herbalist?" And at the time, I was really cynical and really skeptical, and said, why would I want to do that? Why would I want to go and see a weirdo herbalist? But I was really desperate, so I just thought I'll try it. And I was going down the route of trying different things, and I tried acupuncture and various bits and pieces. And I went to see a medical herbalist, and he he listened to my story, and there were lots of tears involved, and um, he gave me a tincture and a powder and a herbal tea to take. So it was quite a lot. And most of it tasted really disgusting. And it was the first time I'd ever taken herbal medicine. It was a bit of a shock to my system. Um, but I got better. I got better pretty quickly. Two weeks in, and I was really on it with the regime. I felt really quite different. The pain really subsided really quickly, and I was just really intrigued and curious.
Yeah.
Um, I couldn't really believe it. So I started going to workshops. I did an evening workshop, and then I did a half day and a day, and then I did a weekend, and then I ended up doing a week's residential with two really amazing herbalists. And I then applied to do a 6-month course up at the Royal Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, which was a fantastic course. It was a bit like walking into Harry Potter, a classroom full of jars with dried herbs, really magical.
Yeah.
But it was also quite tough. We had homework to do. It was a leisure course, and you got a certificate at the end. It was one weekend every month for 6 months, and it included field trips and learning about the history of herbal medicine and lots of making different ointments and salves and infused oils and all sorts of bits and pieces. Field trips are fantastic, and it really inspired me. And I just thought, wow, I want to learn more. I found it really hard because I hadn't studied, I hadn't been in academic life really, since I was at school, really. I mean, I did go to university, but I did hotel and catering management, which was academic, but this was a different level. This was learning about plants and botany, and I had to do Harvard referencing on the assignments, and just totally different.
Yeah.
Um, so I applied to a college in Manchester to do a herbal medicine course, which was 5 years. And I started doing that. And the first year was anatomy and physiology. And I remember saying to uh, the lecturer I mean, literally the coffee break of the first lesson, I can't do this. I can't do it. This is way above my academic learning experience. We were learning about cells and the makeup of the cell, and I just had no idea what he was talking about. I had no idea how hard it was going to be. But I did 2 years, and then they cancelled the
Oh
course. It
no.
was just devastating. And I'd crammed 2 years into 12 months. So I'd done every Friday doing anatomy and physiology, and then one weekend a month doing naturopathy, which included um, um, iridology and some herbal medicine and nutrition and lots of different things. Um, so then we were left as a group, as a class, a bit high and dry, and a few people didn't even continue. I had a look around a couple of different colleges, and then I ended up finding Hartwood, who are based down in East Sussex,
Okay.
and they do a mixture of online learning and face to face.
Okay.
So it's just under 4,000 hours of study. So it was a full-time course,
Mm.
as well as doing clinical examination training, and also face to face training. So a minimum of 500 hours sitting in front of patients, taking their cases. You start by listening and observing, then you're allowed to ask one question, and then you're allowed to ask a few, and then you build up to taking a full consultation over an hour. And that was fantastic. So I qualified eventually. I didn't start actually training thinking I want to be a medical herbalist. I just wanted to learn more. I
Yeah.
was so interested in what plants could do and just how it all worked. I was so intrigued and really interested. And I think, if to be fair, I think if I'd known how hard the course was going to be, clinical examination training, like if you've got a tummy ache and you go and see your doctor, and your doctor will feel your tummy and feel your liver, and take your blood pressure, listen to your lungs, listen to your back if you might have a chest infection. We were trained to do all of that.
Yeah.
We're trained in red flags and differential diagnosis, botany. anatomy, physiology, pathophysiology, herbal therapeutics, all sorts. It's a
Mm.
huge
Yeah, it's
course.
amazing, really amazing. But I suppose
Yes,
you have to know, I suppose if you're doing like a clinical examination with, if you're seeing patients, you need to know,
yes,
I suppose, if you can maybe feel something that isn't right,
yeah,
be able to signpost
absolutely.
them. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, there's a reason why it's really, really
yeah,
detailed. And the course that I did, then qualified me to become a member of the National Institute of Medical Herbalists.
yeah,
So then I can get my insurance, and you'll find me and lots of other herbalists on their website. So that's a great, that's a great register to be on. To be fair, it's great for me and great to have that kind of seal of approval. A few people have
yeah,
said, "Oh, I've been looking for a herbalist who's been trained to this standard," which is great. It's
yeah.
nice to hear.
Yeah, and I think there's having that sort of backup from, when you're part of a professional body is really important. So I'm a qualified yoga teacher, and I qualified with the Yoga Alliance. And so, being part of the Yoga Alliance, like, it speaks for itself
Yeah,
when you're, because really, anybody could teach yoga. And I'm the
yeah,
same as you. Like, when I was learning, like, there's a lot of physiology in that, and I'm like, this is like over my head. I wasn't even interested in science when I was at school. So it's like,
yeah,
like, and I have to do continuing professional stuff as
absolutely.
well. And so I'm always like on the lookout for things that, so with the Yoga Alliance, it's YACEP, which is just like continuing education provider. And you have to be on this like 3-year rotation of, getting more training hours in. And yeah, and but I think it's really important to find whatever it's in, to find something, like you say, and like with the Yoga Alliance, that you've got that professional backing, because
Yeah,
it
it's
stands for something, doesn't it?
absolutely. I mean, it's brilliant for personal development, and you need to do that continued learning.
Yeah.
The National Institute did a menopause summit in autumn of last year, whole weekend full of talks and seminars online, all about working with women journeying through peri and menopause.
Mm.
Really fantastic amount of learning, really interesting webinars. I learned lots. We covered all of that in our course, but there were some brilliant guest speakers. They do an online conference every year. They do a face-to-face event over 3 days every year. Lots of the suppliers that I work with offer webinars twice a month, in focusing on diseases. Might be rheumatoid arthritis, or it could be on inflammation, it could be on gut health, it could be on lots of different things. But it's really important, I think, to keep up that continued learning, because it doesn't end with the course. And several medical herbalists have said to me, you'll only really start learning when you qualify and when you're sitting in front of your patients. And that's so true. I learned so much from the patients who I spend time with. I learned so much from them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the same with yoga as well. Like, I obviously did yoga long before I decided to go the teaching route, and it's only sort of something that I'm slowly getting back into, sort of like the other side of having children, I guess. Like, I now feel like, I want to get back into work of some kind. And but it's I feel like I do my best learning, like I can sit down all day long and read about yoga and read about the poses, but the physical doing of this and being with people and teaching them how to do it is really what, like, makes the difference.
And that's why I find growing my own herbs really makes a big difference. So I grow about 60 herbs in total. I have an allotment where we mainly grow vegetables, and I do grow some herbs, but I have more herbs in my garden at home. And it's so great seeing the herbs through the seasons. You get to know the plants in a completely different way. You can save the seeds for the following year. I can give patients seeds as gifts if they're interested in growing their own herbs. It's really good for my mental health, being out in the fresh air and, being with nature. It's incredibly healing. So I really love being able to grow my own herbs, and I would like to be more self-sufficient.
Yeah.
Last year was a disaster. I had
Uh,
all of these great dreams of, being completely self-sufficient and making lots of my own tinctures. And the weather here was so awful.
I know.
I mean, so awful. We had so much rain.
Yeah,
So
I know. It was not good here. So as soon as you said like last year was a disaster, I was like, I felt that in my soul because we have an allotment and we live in a split level flat, so we have a balcony
yeah,
as well. And so we do most of our growing for the most of the time we've lived here, it was just balcony only. And then we've had the allotment. This will be the third full growing season. And yeah, last year, the first year, the first full growing season, I felt like I'd completely cracked it. I was like, I'm amazing. And then last
check
year,
me out with my veg
yeah,
plots.
yeah. And then last year I was like, well, this isn't ideal now, is it? And
Yeah,
it was chaotic. And I didn't grow on the balcony at all last year. But I am going to do it this year. And kind of in the way that you just said you do it, vegetables at the allotment, and I'm going to do herbs on my balcony.
fantastic.
That is something I really want to do. I mean, I have grown herbs and like dabbled in it, but not to much of an extent. And I would like to make my balcony a real focus of that this year. Uh,
Wonderful.
and it's a south facing balcony, so it's very hot.
Right. So
So
it'd be great for things like the Mediterranean herbs, which like a slightly drier soil, like the rosemaries and sage and thyme. They would all be great. And herbs, to be fair, are pretty hardy.
yeah,
So I'd say the key thing would be to start with stuff that you really enjoy, you like in your food, and you can start growing it, in terms of culinary kitchen herbs, and dive in that way. Um, and there's lots of stuff now on TV. People like Tim Spector who are talking about how herbs are now classed as phytonutrients, and they do count towards your 30 a week. Some of
amazing.
some of them only class them as half a point, but if you're putting lots of herbs into your food, it's a great way of getting more diversity into your diet.
Yeah, so I mean, we've obviously discussed about everything, what sparked your interest in it and your story, how you got to where you are now. So how do you kind of see the connection between herbal medicine and your overall holistic well-being, maybe physically and mentally for maybe yourself and for maybe everyone?
Sure. So when I see a patient for the first time, I will ask them to fill in a patient registration form before we meet so that I can just be aware if they've got any existing health diagnoses or if they're on any medication, which is really common. I would say probably 8 out of 10 of the patients who I see are on some form of medication, and some are on lots. And some people are dealing with really long-standing chronic issues, and some people come from more of a health MOT, and both are absolutely fine. I can, I'm very happy working with all sorts of different people. But sometimes when I see someone, well, we always go through diet. It's really, really important. And I go into quite a lot of depth on diet. So I'll go through what time they eat and drink, and water, coffee, tea, oily fish, what they would have for a typical meal. Do they have snacks? What time do they have the snacks? But we'll also go through what the energy's like and what the sleep is like. We'll go through obviously why they've booked the appointment in the first place, allergies, all the different systems of the body, and it's over an hour and a half. So I'm gathering all of this information, and while I'm talking to them, I'm putting together ideas of herbs of what would work for them. And everyone's different, everything is completely bespoke. So I could see two people who have the same diagnosis label, whether that's IBS or whether that's stress, anxiety, or low mood or insomnia, what high blood pressure. But they actually could have quite different treatments. They could have different forms of herbs, and they could even have different herbs in their prescriptions, because for me, everyone is individual. Everyone has a different health story. Everyone has a different health history. Everyone has different allergies. Everyone has a different diet. Everyone drinks different amounts of coffee and water. So for me, it's about treating the root cause of what's going on,
Yeah.
and trying to treat the root cause, obviously, then to resolve the problem. And as a herbalist, we really believe that the body has an innate ability to heal itself, and the herbs really support that. Obviously, there are cases where that isn't possible because things have gone too far down the line. But for me, sometimes I don't even start with herbs. We might start with diet, daylight, lifestyle, movement, caffeine, um, hydration, stress management, nature connection for a month, and really work on gut health. And then we might start on herbal medicine, because I don't want to give someone herbal medicine if their gut and their digestion is really, really weak,
Yeah.
because they're not going to absorb the herbs. And that's a waste of their money, and it's a waste of my precious herbs.
Yeah.
So I want their gut health to be really as good as we can get it, ideally, before we start the herbal medicine. And there will be some patients who we might not even work with herbs at all. We might simply do more of a diet lifestyle approach. Um, and that's a really, really important part, I think, of what I offer.
Yeah.
Really important.
I love everything you said, like as you were saying, connecting to nature, being in the daylight, all of those sorts of things. Like it's funny because like those things frequently come up time and time again in the things I read, in the
Yeah,
the guests I even have on here. It
yeah,
it frequently comes up time and time again. And I think and it's funny, I was actually talking to somebody the other day about it, and some of these things, like the herbal medicine and daylight and the way we live more seasonally, all of these things, they're just very natural
yeah,
parts of who we have always been, like ancestrally, but
yes,
we've been so far removed from it, like ripped away from it, that actually when we come back round to it, we're like, oh, like of course
yeah,
these things work, because that's how it was always done. Like of course.
absolutely.
And I think that the modern world has, removed us so far from it. And, so often I think in modern medicine has its place, but I think that, there's a lot more you can do as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what I must say is that some of us need to be on medication.
Yeah.
And modern day science can be incredible. It saves people's lives. So I never say to people, you must come off your medication. Some people want to come off medication. It's really important that they involve their GP in that process. But there are alternatives to some routes. And I see it time and time again with patients who might have migraines or, like you say, hormonal imbalances. And actually, I see a lot of women who get to perimenopause and they start having lack of focus, concentration problems, brain fog, memory issues. Um, they start feeling maybe a little bit low. The confidence is affected. The skin and hair and nails start changing. Obviously, the periods could be in flux, and often they're offered antidepressants as a kind of first line treatment.
Yeah.
And I do see a lot of patients like that who then we start working on diet, and we work on lifestyle and daylight and exercise, and maybe reducing things like alcohol consumption and caffeine, making sure they're getting enough protein into their diet to manage their blood sugar, manage those energy dips during the day. And I get really good results. And, with some herbs as well, it can really, really work.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, some of us need medication, so I would never say, everyone has to take the natural route. And actually, I would say, like I said, eight out of 10 people that I see are on some form of medication, and they have herbal medicine alongside that. And I would always check, herb drug interactions before I dispense any medication. We're trained to do that.
Yeah.
In the same way, we're trained to check red flags. We're trained to do differential diagnosis. So it's a really important part of what I do. I
Yeah.
think it's important to be sensible.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like I was on antidepressants. I came off them a year ago. So after I had
Right.
my second, I've always had health anxiety, probably for as long for most of my adult life. But it was a lot worse after I had him, probably a form of postpartum anxiety. And so when you feel like desperation,
Yes.
so I went to the doctors and they put me on antidepressants, and I was on them for probably about 6 months.
Yeah.
Um, but I said to my doctor, like, I would really like to come off them because I was having some side effects from them,
Hmm.
that like funny shaky legs. I was like, what is going on? And I went to the doctors and they were like, oh yeah, it's just a side effect of the medication. I was like, I hate it. Like, it's so weird. And I said, can I start coming off them? And they were like, sure, it's up to you if you want to.
Yeah.
Do it gradually, obviously. And I did do it really gradually, even probably over an even longer period than was
Yes.
necessary. Uh,
Really important.
yeah, because I didn't want to you know, I think if you cut them out, you get withdrawal as well from that.
Absolutely. It can be really dangerous. I do work with some patients who are looking to come off antidepressants, and it's definitely not for everyone. But there are certain things that, you have to involve your GP in that process. You have to do it really sensibly, really, really gradually. Um, there are herbs that can support that process. It might be a long, long process. And there's also things to consider like the season. So you would never, ever look at taking someone off antidepressants or potentially reducing their dose, even involving their GP in the winter
Yeah,
months.
like I did. Don't do what I did.
Oh no, no. You start in the spring, in sunnier days. I think this year January has been quite tough for a lot of people.
Yeah.
The weather hasn't been great. It hasn't been that cold, but it's been really dark and really rainy.
Mm.
It feels like it's been an extra long month. So you would never start that process in a wintry month because lots of people do struggle with SAD,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they need some support during those months. So it's advisable not to do that, to be
Yeah,
honest.
don't do as I do.
Yeah, 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 absolutely.
But yeah, like just when I was thinking about coming off them as well, it was always in my mind that, it doesn't have to be forever. If I really felt like I needed that brain break again, which is kind of how I definitely viewed that at the time, was like, I'm exhausted. I need something. And I suppose that was the easiest option at the time. And there has definitely
Yeah,
been times over the last year where I've thought like this is tough. Do I need to call back? Do I need
yeah,
to get my prescription reissued? But I haven't. But that's not to say that it's that there are not other ways. Try and find other ways to manage. And even sometimes, like being a yoga teacher and like teaching meditation, I'm like, why can't I do it to myself? I can tell everybody else
yeah.
to do it.
It's quite easy to treat other people. Well, easy. It's much easier to treat other people than it is to treat yourself. It's
Yeah.
really hard to treat yourself. Actually, there's some really interesting research that was being talked about on TV a couple of weeks ago. And they were talking about how hot yoga has been seen to be really effective to combat low mood
Okay.
in a clinical trial, and actually as effective as an antidepressant. So that's really interesting research that's been done.
Yeah.
It was one of the TB GPs that was talking about that. So yeah, bringing in movement and on your allotment, daylight, and really good nourishing food. It can all really, really help as well.
Yeah.
And there are lots of herbs out there that can really support mood, adaptogens that really help your body adapt to physical and mental stress. Um, and a herbalist would take all of that into consideration, take into consideration, your constitution. Are you a hot person? Are you a dry person? Are you a cold person? What's your best time of day? All of those little nuances which make up, you being unique.
Yeah. And I love that about, so much of things that I guess are not considered, I guess considered more alternative than,
Mm,
like the straight and narrow of, modern medicine being the only answer to everything all the time.
absolutely.
Is
Yeah,
just that there are so many different things that you can factor in, and sometimes like you say, alongside modern medicine, because some people do have to, there are
absolutely.
many things that do require, um,
Absolutely.
a medication, like just springs to mind, for example, one thing might be like type 1 diabetes, like you're probably not gonna get around that.
It's essential, absolutely
Yeah,
essential. That's why I always say, there are some people that need medication to stay alive. It's really, really important.
yeah,
Um, and yeah, it's an important part of my job looking into what medication people are on, and it's a really important thing to consider.
yeah, so yeah, as I'm talking to you, I find it so interesting, especially like knowing how much you had to learn to get to where you
Oh,
are.
it was
Like,
hard. It was
it's
hard.
but it's incredible, isn't it? Because I don't think that everybody straight away would think that it has
No.
that much depth to it.
Someone
Um,
said to me recently, "Oh, you're a herbalist. Have you done much training?" And
what
I think the
did you say?
challenge,
Yes, I have.
yeah, I think the challenge sometimes is that people, myself included, a few years ago, you see courses advertised on maybe social media that say at the end of this course you'll get a certificate, but it might not be very thorough. And for me to buy, herbs from herb suppliers, they need to have a copy of my certificate. They will need a copy of my insurance. That's a whole process that you have to go through. And I think that's also why it's really important to be a member of that professional organisation. It gives you that little seal of approval. If I'd known how hard it was going to be, and I was working full time at the time as well. So eventually, I wound the business down, handed the notice in on the office, ended up becoming freelance, moving my work home, and I worked on a freelance basis. So I worked full time and I studied full time, and I would be cramming at lunch hours, working late, working early, working at weekends, studying, writing assignments. Um, didn't really see a lot of my friends for a few years. I had like a very, very boring social life. I was always saying, oh, I need to go and finish this assignment, or I've got another lesson I need to do, or a webinar to log on to. And I think if there were people out there who are really interested in becoming a medical herbalist, I would say, do your research about the course, but also realize that there will be some sacrifices along the way, because it does take quite a lot of time, and it is tough. It is tough.
Yeah,
But there's an amazing feeling when you qualify. It's absolutely incredible. I'm super proud of what I've achieved, and I really love my job. I love helping people feel better. It's such a privilege when someone books in and they hand over their health to you. It's a big deal. Some people have been going through really awful health challenges for a very, very long time, for many years. Some people have not felt heard by their healthcare practitioner, maybe. Some people might have felt a bit fobbed off, or they've gone through really tough times, whether it's bereavement or divorce, or losing a job, or stress within the family, and that's caused problems with the health. Um, so it's a really big deal when people hand their health over to you and they share their health story with you, and you hold that space for someone. It's a real privilege to work with people.
yeah. When you were talking about like studying, I did my master's when I worked full time, and
Wow.
I did it with the Open University. So same, like cramming by small lights at night, no
Yeah.
breaks, and but when I sat at the Barbican and like looked around at like I did it, like never been prouder, more proud than when I got my bachelor's degree, because it was almost like just like a natural progression from school. I went to university, did my bachelor's. I was proud, but like it was it was all
Yeah,
I'd ever known, like learning up until that point. And so I went back 7 years later and did my master's. And yeah, it was full time. I did a talk master's, so it's a full time course. It, like with the Open University, my understanding with like a bachelor's degree is you can take a period of time, um
right.
many years, but this had to be done within the 2 year period. And yeah, it was hard, but uh doing it and completing it, and at the end of it I was like I deserve this after
Absolutely.
everything.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I had COVID to lockdown to contend with. College had to flip their clinic, the training clinic, to online and offer an online clinic. They did it so quickly, set up an online clinic so that we could still see patients online and sit and observe those consultations. I actually had to take 6 months out of the course because all my freelance work dried up. I lost all of my freelance clients because I used to specialize in travel PR. So all of that disappeared
Yeah.
over the period of about 48 hours. My parents got stuck overseas, they couldn't get home. So I just had 6 months out, and I mean, it was very tough financially. Oh my goodness, very, very tough, but I kind of became a bit self-sufficient.
Yeah.
I started growing my own vegetables, and the allotment had to slightly go to rack and ruin because I was saving money on the petrol, so I wasn't driving to the allotment, so I just focused everything in the garden. But there were elements of that 6 month period which were quite peaceful and gave me the time to spend some time in the garden, which was really, really nice. But then in my final year, I was really run down. The working full time and studying full time was starting to creep up on me,
Yeah.
and I eventually got COVID in when would it have been, March 2022, and then I got shingles
Oh no.
not long after, a real sign that I was very run down. So I had to take a bit of time out there, just 2 weeks. I was very stressed about my finals coming up, my clinical examination finals coming up, trying to finish all the coursework and all of the assignments. And actually, when I finished studying, it almost felt like there was a strange, almost like a hole in my life for where that studying had been. I don't know whether you felt that as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was kind of like looking over your shoulder thinking, I should be studying now. What do I do?
I need to be doing something.
Yeah, it felt a bit discombobulating, and it took a bit of time actually to get out of that student, mindset of, oh, I've got to be studying, I've got to be doing an assignment, and make that transition into being in practice and actually being a medical herbalist. So, but yeah, it was a great experience, and now, of course, I'm just continuing to learn, and I can read my books in a more leisurely way,
Yeah.
which is
It is nice
really nice.
when it's all done. I remember when I finished from my master's, everyone was like, "Are you going to do a PhD?" And I'm like, "No, this is
And
where that ends."
I can't believe how quickly that first year has gone. I qualified in September, October 22, pretty much set up in practice straight away, even though everyone said, you need a break, you need some time off. But I had had some patients from my training clinic who were keen to transfer over to my care. So I actually started with 3 patients
Oh,
on day
lovely.
one, which was amazing. Really, that felt really special. And that year and a bit, has just flown by. And I feel in quite a different place now. This time last year, I was starting to get really stressed about running my first workshop. Oh my goodness, I was so nervous. I think because I've always been promoting other people in my old career, I've that was easy because it's about them, and I don't mind standing up in front of a room full of people talking about that other client, the clients, but when it's you, it's a completely different focus. And being in the spotlight was kind of tricky. I felt quite nervous, but I've run so many workshops in the last 12 months, both face to face and then started to do online workshops as well. And I love it. I just love sharing that knowledge that I've gained over the last couple of years, and introducing other people to herbal medicine, and, using herbs in their cooking more, or starting to grow herbs. It's really great.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I see the stuff you do on Instagram and I'm always
Oh,
I love it. I love
thanks.
everything about the brand that is you. And
Oh, thank
just even down to like the colors and everything. Like it is, it's I'm the kind of person. So I used to work as a personal brand strategist before this is me. Like I used to do this, I used to do this, I used to do this, but practically from like my I don't know, like my mid 20s onwards, I've worked for myself. And so, yeah, so I used to do that up until I had the children. And then I was like, right, I'm not doing that anymore. And that's, how yoga came about after that. So, yeah, so like things like the branding and stuff, like maybe not everybody sees it, but I like things to be so aesthetically pleasing. And I'm almost like I'm terrible with my own Instagram feed because I'm like, that doesn't look perfect. Like I don't like it because I like the way really like the way things look. So when I see the stuff you do and I see like the colors, I like it really just speaks to my eyes.
Oh, that's so, honestly, that's so lovely of you to say that. I'm really, really happy with my branding. I suppose now I should give a shout out to my friend Anna, who did my branding. I was probably a nightmare client because I had quite a good idea of what I wanted and the colours, and obviously green is a bit of a go-to, but I really wanted that kind of reddy brown of the earth, and also they are the colour of traditional apothecary bottles.
Okay, yeah.
So I really, really wanted that reddy brown colour as well. Um, and and I was quite keen on having a pestle and mortar, because I do make herbal remedies, and that's something that I really enjoy doing. And then the name came from my Nana Ivy, who's on my website, and she is on my Instagram somewhere. She was massively inspiring to me. She died when I was 11, so I didn't know her for that long, but she lived at Woodside Cottage. And so I've called my company Woodside Apothecary as a bit of a nod to her. And she was pretty much self sufficient. She was a baker by trade. She kept chickens. She was a beekeeper. And now my brother is a third generation beekeeper. Um, she had at one point ducks and pigs, and grew all her own fruit and vegetables. And actually, it was her father who started the allotments, which now me and my dad work on. So it's been in
Amazing.
the family for nearly 100 years,
That's
which is
incredible, isn't
so
it?
special.
Yeah.
And I think I'm the first woman to be allowed to work on the allotment. I think it's always been the men in the family. My
Yeah.
great granddad, Nonna Ivy's dad, and her husband, my granddad, and my dad, and then me and my dad. So it's a really special place for me, and it's lovely to grow herbs. And I think it's the first time that anyone's grown herbs on the allotment. And sometimes some of the how shall I put this, older allotment people, who are a bit more traditional in their allotment practice, maybe, will say to me, what are you growing all these herbs for? And for me, it's just I grow a lot of herbs on my allotment for my own personal use, and for use in food, and to get to know the plants better. But it is really special having that allotment there. It's great for my mental health. It's exercise. It's fresh air. I have to say I'm getting a bit cabin fever at the moment because it's been a rainy January, and I am desperate to get back to the allotment, and I've got my
Yeah, me
seeds ready
too.
to go.
Yeah, I'm the kind of allotment person or grower that because I don't have I have lots of light in my house. I have so many windows, but that everything that I grow in here just goes leggy without fail. I
Oh,
never bother. I don't have full size window ledges, just very small ones, so nothing could stand on it. And so I am like when everybody else is like, I'm sowing my seeds, I'm like, my seeds will catch up.
They will be fine. So I have a sunroom. My house is really old. It dates back to 1760.
Amazing.
It used to be a brush makers, and it used to be a button makers, and it used to be a clog sole makers. And it has a sunroom which gets the sun from sunrise in the morning until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I find exactly the same thing. If you're not watching those seeds or baby plants, or you dare to go away for a weekend and you don't
Yeah.
have, something like that, they'll go really leggy. But the year of lockdown, I grew cucumbers, aubergines, and tomatoes really successfully in the sunroom. They were fantastic. And herbs that like a slightly warmer environment, like holy basil, was fantastic as well. Um, yeah, some fantastic herbs as well as vegetables. It was great, but it's very easy to let them go over.
Yeah, we've got skylights. We're at the top, so we're only a very short block. There's only a maximum of 4 floors high, and we're split level, so we're across 3 and 4. But yeah, so we've got skylights above the bathroom and above the hallway. It doesn't give enough light for the hallway, but the bathroom is perfect. It's so bright, but it's annoying to everybody else who wants to wash when the bath is full of
Full
plants.
of plants. I love that. I love that.
I
It's
have
That's
one of
great.
those. I have one of those like really big plant trays,
Yeah,
and it balances perfectly on the from the end of the bath, because the end of the bath is like in a little alcove, and it fits perfectly on both edges of the bath and the back of the bath in the alcove. But it is very annoying for everybody to just have to lift them down every time, and
love
I'm always
that.
terrified, like if I've like put little sticks in them, I'm like, nobody fall on the sticks while they're out the bathroom. So
So funny.
it's just easier if we
Yeah,
don't.
absolutely.
So if there's someone who is new to herbal medicine, and they're listening to what you've been saying and they really want to, maybe dive into it a little bit more, is there any sort of herbs you recommend that they start growing, or anything they can start to do?
Yeah, so lots of things. So I would say have a look have a look at their local area, maybe go onto the National Institute website, and there are other associations as well out there, um, and get in touch with their local herbalist, or have a look at their website and see if they're running any events. I run events all the time. I've got 2 workshops coming up in March for people who are local to Cheshire. And it's a great way of learning about plants in a really relaxed environment. Often herbalists will do herb walks, which I do as well. You'll get to do some plant ID and find out about how the herbalist works with different plants. So I would say get yourself along to a workshop. Maybe get some books from the library. I think our libraries are very important and we should support them. So there are some really good books out there. And on my Substack, which I'm not that brilliant at being on, but I'm determined this year to do more posts. It's one of my little
The
resolutions.
second I'm on Substack now, the second you said Substack, and my brain is like, I'm off to find you when we finish this.
Okay, great. So I've set up a little bookshop so people can see some of the books that I recommend, because I get that question quite a lot, and I
Yeah.
have done posts on my Instagram about books that I really love. And there are some brilliant herb books out there which can help. One thing I would say is, if you're venturing out and you're going to start foraging, do it sensibly. Get an app, get a good plant ID book, maybe do it with a proper forager, or go with a herbalist. Don't just suddenly launch out there, because there are lots of plants that look like each other.
Mm.
Which, even like wild garlic, there are lots of plants that look like wild garlic. Even dandelions have some plants that look like dandelions, and just be really sensible about it. If you're not sure, don't take the risk.
Yeah. I know
So I
we
think that's really
we
important.
do forest school with
Oh,
my eldest,
lovely.
and we don't do foraging or anything, but I have an app on my phone. I think it's called Picture This, maybe. It's like a plant ID one, and I used it a lot when I took over the allotment, because I was like standing over the top of things like, what is
What's
this?
this?
And I take a part like a picture of it, and it would come back and be like a mango, and I'm like, I'm pretty certain
No, it's
it's not
not.
a mango. here in East Hertfordshire, probably not. Um,
Maybe not.
but yeah, we were taking pictures in the autumn because they went on like a little mushroom walk, and they're all very young, so it's all about, well, for all of us, don't touch them. We
Yeah.
don't lick our fingers, we don't put our hands near our mouths and things like that. But we were like taking pictures of them and seeing if we could identify what they were. And like my app, every time I took a picture of like a mushroom, it was like, don't eat it.
Oh,
But it was interesting to read about it because it was saying like the mushroom itself looked like something that was probably fine. However, there are others within the family that will
yeah. You have to be,
either get you high or kill you. So like
yeah, you have to be sensible. So yeah, get in touch with your local herbalist, have a look at what workshops and what events are going on, go on a herb walk. It's a really great way, we're almost we're heading towards spring.
yeah, it's
So
nearly,
we'll get,
I can feel it
yeah,
coming.
it's becoming lighter in the evenings. So, there's been more opportunity soon to get out there. Um, start growing some herbs. You don't need an allotment, you don't need a massive garden. You could have a window ledge. Herbs are usually quite hardy. Coriander can be a bit tricky as a culinary herb sometimes, but things like rosemary and thyme and sage, and there are lots of lovely culinary varieties of herbs which I wouldn't necessarily use medicinally, but they would be great in food.
Yeah,
There's lots of different types of thyme. Lemon thyme is really lovely. There's loads of different types of mint, and you could start, putting them into your cooking and looking at your cookery books and start actually growing some of the herbs rather than buying them. That's a really lovely thing to do. Um, I have just this month launched something called Herb Club, which I'm running in person, in Macclesfield as well as online. Because I had friends all over the country who are saying, "When are you going to do something online? We want to come."
yes.
So Herb Club happens once a month, and the next one is the 8th of February. And we do a deep dive into one herb every month, just for an hour. We do a guided plant meditation, and I send the herbs out to everyone who's joining, so they get a lovely little herb club box through the post. And then we do a guided tea tasting, and we talk about, it's using all the senses, so it's called an organoleptic tasting. So what does it smell like, and what does it taste like, and how is it going to a certain part of your body, and how is it getting there. So we do that, and then we do a share. It's optional, but people really like to chat about their experiences, particularly with the tea tasting, and some journaling time. And then at the end, I talk through how I work with that plant in practice, and the plant energetics and the constituents, a little bit of folklore and some science. So it kind of rounds off the hour together. And that's really exciting because it means that people from further away can join me, and and do that online. And I did some firesider workshops before Christmas online, and there were people all over. I sent boxes out in the post with bottles of apple cider vinegar and all the herbs and spices and jars, and all wrapped up in bubble wrap and recycled paper, and everything was packaged up really lovely, and everyone really enjoyed that. That was really fun too. So there's
Amazing.
loads of stuff out there. There's lots of events and things taking place, and you just have to have a little look.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I'm gonna have to check out Herb Club. I am
Uh,
gonna have to check
Come
it out.
to Herb
I want
Club.
to, yeah, I want to learn more, and I want to grow more herbs on the balcony this year. So yeah, I'm gonna be investigating Herb Club, but we will link to everything of yours as well, so people can come and check you out
Oh,
and
great.
everything. So, also, how do you integrate herbs into your own daily life?
So herbs weren't really part of my life before I became a herbalist. I didn't really drink herbal tea, really, at all. Ever. Never ever. Actually, I used to drink about 12 cups of builder's tea every day, which is where one of my problems came from in terms of dehydration. I still love a normal tea. I do still love a normal tea. Um, but now I drink herbal tea every day. after our chat today, I will be putting the kettle on and having a cup of herbal tea. And I mix it up, different days. Sometimes I might go into the garden and have what I call a garden tea and have different herbs and then mix it up with different weeks or different days or different months, depending on what's out in the garden. And that way as well, you're not having the same thing every single day and it's mixing it up quite nicely.
Yeah.
So herbal tea is just part of my daily routine every day, and I really like in the morning to have my cup of herbal tea and maybe do a bit of journaling and plan out my day. And when I'm seeing patients online, I always say to them, have you got a tea with you? And if I see a patient in person, I try and offer them a herbal tea as well. So I've usually got one with me all of the day, really. And I have a flask, which I take my herbal tea round with me. So I'll make up a pot in the morning and then transfer it to my thermos flask, and then it will come with me to the allotment, or it will come with me into the garden. Or if I'm going to friends, I will even take my flask with me. I get much ridicule and much laughter about me turning up with a flask. It's just so much easier. And when I go to my parents' house, I turn up with a flask. They think it's so bizarre, but I've made my tea for the day and then I know that I've drank a litre of tea. So it's really
Yeah.
good, it's good
You know
hydration.
what? I have a 1 litre bottle. You probably see me sipping it, but I carry it around with me everywhere because so I breastfeed my son. So
Yeah,
hydration is so important to me. The second I sit down and start breastfeeding him and my bottle is not with me, it's like my tongue dries up and I'm like, I must have water. And so I just try and keep myself hydrated. So I probably drink about 2 litres a day while I'm breastfeeding,
yeah,
sometimes even more than that. And yeah, I'm the kind of person, I travel with my own drink wherever
yeah. I
I
have I have my flask and it's appeared on my Instagram grid, and
go.
I do talk about my flask quite a lot. So I have herbal tea. I mean, every day really. I take a herbal tincture to support me if I'm feeling a bit run down, or I had a really bad throat just before Christmas and I actually lost my voice and I had to cancel some appointments. I just didn't have a voice and couldn't do consultations. And also, I didn't want to be making herbal medicine for my patients. If I was coughing, it didn't feel very responsible. So I just closed the door to my dispensary and I had a couple of days off, and and made my own herbal tincture. So herbs are just part of my life. They're in the garden, they're on the allotment. We're in harvest time, in drier months, they're hanging up. So I'm drying my own herbs. So they're just part of really all my life. I have loads and loads of herb books. It's the one thing they don't warn you about when you start college, is how addictive it will be buying herb books.
Yeah.
So I have books about gardening and herbs, and there's a big stack of them here next to me while we're talking. Historical herbal books as well, books about adaptogens, books about women's health, men's health, all sorts of different things. So yeah, I'm surrounded by herbs in all sorts of ways.
I do like a herbal tea. I'm definitely would like to be, I think, a bit more adventurous. I am either I ate too much and I need a mint tea,
Yeah,
or I feel a bit stressed and I need a chamomile tea.
yeah. I mean,
And
they're two great teas.
yeah,
Chamomile and peppermint are fantastic. They're not for everyone, which is also really interesting.
yeah,
But they are really, really wonderful herbs. They're fantastic.
yeah,
And the one thing I do get comments on quite a lot is when I prescribe a herbal tea for a patient. When I'm blending that tea, I'm blending it bespoke for that patient.
yeah,
And the herbs, when they're carefully dried and they're full of aroma and they're full of vitality, they're a bit chunkier and it's loose leaf. So, you need a cafetiere to put them into. But once people have tried a proper herbal tea made from scratch with really vibrant herbs, they don't usually go back to tea bags.
yeah. Now I'm really looking forward to growing season.
Yeah, and that's why I take my flask with me, because if I was to have a herbal tea bag at a friend's house, I just think, oh, I've got all these amazing herbs that I would have normally.
Yeah.
in my kitchen, which I've hand dried. So yeah, I prefer making my own blends.
Yeah, I actually, for the first time this year, tried lavender. So
Oh,
one of my really good friends, her father-in-law has loads of lavender in his garden, and she was like, "Do you want some?" And I was like, "Absolutely." So we go out to dinner, and she's like, afterwards, we're in like the boot of her car doing like this little lavender swap, and dried it out. And yeah, first time I've ever done it, and yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved
gorgeous. If I'm making a tea and I put lavender in, I only put a very, very small percentage because it can really take over and be very overpowering.
it. Yeah.
I love lavender. I work with lavender on an awful lot.
Mm.
Um, it's probably one of the herbs that I work with, I would say, almost every week. It's so fantastic. Lots of people know it as a calming herb and to help with sleep, and it's in lots of sleepy teas. But I also work with it in tincture format, which is an alcoholic preparation where the herb is macerated in alcohol for about 4 weeks, usually, longer for some herbs. And then the herb is drained off, and I would compost it, and then that alcoholic liquid that's left is the tincture.
Okay.
And then that would be put into a blend for a patient. So a tincture for a patient could have 5 or 7 different herbal tinctures in it to make up the blend.
Mm.
So yeah, I love lavender. It's a beautiful herb. I have some in my garden.
Yeah, yeah, I have where we live actually, there's quite a lot of lavender bushes. And I said last year, I was like, I think I might go out like under the cover of darkness and just like steal a bit off
Take
of the
some
bush.
cuttings.
The thing is, I'm allergic to bee stings. So
Oh,
me and lavender bushes, trying to walk past the lavender bushes, I'm like, let's you carry on doing what you're doing. I'll carry on doing what I'm doing. We don't need to meet.
so on my lavender in my garden, I don't get that many honeybees. I only really get bumblebees, and
Okay.
they don't really bother me so much, but they are fantastic for the bees. And of course, we need to look after our bees as much
Do.
as
Yeah, when I'm at the allotment, I'm always like, our allotment is triangular,
right.
and like the site in general, and there's houses on each side, so it's actually quite sheltered because of that. So in like bad weather, we do fare largely okay. um but I always think like if anybody from the houses is like looking out, they must see me at random times, like, just like throwing funny shapes because like I've encountered a bee. And I'm always like, right, we're just going to leave the bees there. I'm going to go up here. You do need to,
Yeah,
you need to do your thing. I will step back. So it, I find that like a really interesting, like being a gardener and being allergic to bees is
yeah,
interesting because I am not the kind of person who, like, when there's bees around you and everyone's like, stay still. I'm not staying.
you're running in the
I'm
opposite
off.
direction.
So yeah, it's interesting growing and having an allergy to bees, but
Be
you know,
careful.
we coexist fine. The good
Yeah,
thing about
happily.
bees, they really only sting you if they're in trouble, and I don't intend to give them any trouble.
Exactly. You're going to stay well away.
Yeah, I've been stung twice in my whole life. Touch wood that I won't get stung this year. But and one of those times was a bee flew up the arm of my jacket, and I shook it down to get it out. It was just like one of those things like you could never like choreograph that again. It would just
Yeah,
like it would
that's
never.
like a freak accident,
Yeah.
really.
And actually, I flung it out like by shaking my arm, and it landed sort of on the top of my hand. It was free to go. It could have gone, but it stung me instead. And I was like, oh.
No.
But yeah, those sorts of things, he felt like he was in danger, so we'll let him off. But
Oh.
yeah, the rest of the time we just coexist nicely together.
Yeah, my brother's a beekeeper, and he sometimes doesn't even wear gloves when he goes to the hives. He says you can feel the vibration of the bees better, and you can get in and out rather than wearing clumsy, clunky gloves.
Yeah.
And he isn't really bothered by stings anymore. But the last time that I went to look at the bees with him, which was in the winter, it was Boxing Day, and he said, "Oh, this hive's really calm, and they're really very easygoing." I got stung, and yeah, I just think they can sense the fear.
Yeah, we went to like an event last summer, and they had like local raw honey, and
Nice.
the beekeepers were there and showing the bees, in like those glass panes, and it was
Yeah,
the best thing, because for me, I've never been able to get that close to bees, and to be able to, like, I was watching them for ages. Like, my daughter was like, "I'm bored, can we go?" And I'm like, "No, like, this is fascinating
oh,
for
so
me."
interesting.
And being able to be so close to the bees is not something that is would be normal in my life. Like, I probably couldn't be a beekeeper, certainly not on the balcony. But
No.
it's, yeah, to me it was fascinating. Like, we buy raw honey
Mm.
locally, and things like that. But yeah, just to be up close with the bees was amazing. I guess especially because I can't really get up close to bees in any other situation.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
do use quite a bit of beeswax actually, for things like balms and
Mm,
ointments.
yeah.
And actually, I do have some propolis tincture as well, which I work with. So, yeah, maybe me and my brother need to start doing something together. We
Yeah,
keep
join
talking about
forces.
it, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's got to be. It's got to be. He's a landscape gardener as well as a beekeeper, so there's got to be something that we can do
There
there.
is. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll look out for it. There's definitely
Yeah.
something in the pipeline.
Well, last year, someone approached me after a workshop and said that they were designing an apothecary garden for the RHS show
Mm,
in Cheshire at Tatton, and could I help a bit with the choice of plants, and how did I work as a herbalist, and how do I grow and harvest and dry herbs? And so I helped with that project, and he was really kind and let me be on the garden for a couple of days at the show, and we had Francis Tophill on the garden and Joe Swift, and they did some filming, and it was on Gardener's World, which was amazing.
mm,
So yeah, Skylark Design just outside of Macclesfield. It was really, really great to be involved with that. A really
amazing.
lovely thing to do.
It's really interesting, isn't it, where the opportunities can come from? And
Absolutely. It was
yeah,
great. I loved it. It was a really fun thing to be involved in, and the garden looked absolutely gorgeous. So
yeah.
it was great.
Fantastic. So for anyone who's listening, who may be thinking that they would like to start incorporating herbs into their lives, do you have any beginner tips or any resources or anything like that that you can point them towards?
So, as I said, I would definitely go to some workshops, get yourself a really good plant ID book, um, go to a herb walk, and get to actually walk with a herbalist so that you can do some plant ID in real life. Start with some culinary herbs and start incorporating herbs in your kitchen and in your cooking. There's nothing like growing your own herbs, and there's nothing like fresh plants, and as we both know with our allotments, fresh vegetables in your recipes. So it's a great way of incorporating herbs. Um, and yeah, just have a go at growing some herbs and see how you get on. And if you want to take herbs medicinally, I would always say go and see a registered herbalist. Don't suddenly launch into taking herbs in a medicinal way. Sometimes I meet people who say, "Oh, I have rosemary in the garden and I drink rosemary tea all day long every day." I would definitely advise not to do that, because that would be a medicinal dose of that herb.
Yes,
And that's
okay, yeah.
really, that's completely different. And rosemary is actually not for everyone. So if you are going to start taking herbs in a medicinal way, do it safely.
Yeah.
And go and see a registered herbalist. Obviously, I'd love it if it's me, but there's lots of us out there, and you just can have a look on the National Institute's website and find a local herbalist, local to your area.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It's honestly been amazing,
Oh, thank
fascinating, and
you.
I've really enjoyed chatting with you. So, where can everybody find you online and connect with you and see your fantastic branding, of course?
Oh, so I have a website which is really simple. It's woodsideapothecary.com. I know apothecary is a tricky word to spell. I'm really sorry. Woodsideapothecary.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Woodside Apothecary. My picture, I've got a red jumper on the allotment, so you can find me.
Which, by the way, matches your branding perfectly.
It does, I know. And that was a complete fluke. I've had that jumper for about 15 years. I'm also on Substack. And you can find me there. I'm definitely going to do more on Substack. If you go onto my website, there is a newsletter sign up. So I do Words from the Apothecary, usually about once a month, and update people on the events that I'm doing. And of course, there's always consultations. I offer a free, absolutely no obligation discovery call, when you can book that on my website, and we can have a virtual cup of herbal tea together. I can answer any questions that you've got about herbal medicine or about becoming a patient. You can find out a little bit more about whether herbal medicine is right for you and whether we're the right fit, which is really important. And that link is on my website, and you can just book straight in for a 15-minute call. And of course, there's also Herb Club, which is once a month. And details of that are also on my website and also on my social media.
Excellent. And I will link everything in the description so people can click through. I will do the work on spelling the hard words. It'll be a copy paste.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me.
It's been lovely. I've really enjoyed it. It's been great having a chat with you, and I hope I've inspired you to grow some more herbs.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Oh my goodness, wasn't that just the most incredible episode? I have honestly learned so much from Cath. I had an interest in herbalism prior to speaking to Cath, but you know what? It just really opened my eyes more to what is on offer and what a medical herbalist like Cath can do to work alongside you with whatever health issue you are facing. If you are facing one, it might just be, just looking to get some help with some general well-being. So I am so excited for today's episode. I hope you loved it as much as I enjoyed having the conversation with Cath. Now don't forget, you can get £15 off a consultation with Cath. All you need to do is head over to her Instagram at Woodside Apothecary, or head to her website woodsideapothecary.com. Contact her there. Just say that you heard this episode of the podcast with her on it, and she will do the rest, and you can get £15 off a consultation with her. So I hope you go ahead and do that. Cath is incredible. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. If you want to come follow me over on Instagram, you can find me there at The Slow Living Collective. I'm also at The Slow Living Collective on TikTok, and you can also find my website, theslowlivingcollective.com. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today, and I will catch you in the next episode.